And now we will start with Ondi Timoner. You see her bio in your program, and she's going to do a modified version of her We Talk. Thank you so much, Ondi.
Hello, 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 hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Just to clarify, I actually am going to start with a little clip, but this is not a, We Talk is a talk show that I host for women everywhere. It's a live event and a traveling talk show. So I'm just improvising right now and just telling you. Ironically, this event is called We Talk, but I also have a talk show called We Talk. And We Talk is shooting next weekend, for example, at Art Basel in Miami, and it shot last month at Airbnb in San Francisco, and it shot at Tribeca and South by, and will be at Sundance this year. And I urge you to participate as women in the show, watch the show, promote the show, but also come on the show with your work as it travels around. And also, these live events that we have are free. So check out at We Talk Culture online. This that I'm about to do is a modified version of my TED Talk, which I've modified to update it a bit. I just didn't realize I was giving a solo talk. I thought I was being interviewed today in front of you. So this is the best I could do because I'm on deadline on a film right now. But I hope it'll inspire you. We're going to start with a small clip.
A few hundred years ago, the lions and tigers were kings of the jungle. And then one day they wound up in zoos. I suspect we're in the same trap.
Internet pioneer Josh Harris told me this from inside a cyber bunker in Manhattan at the turn of the millennium. Harris meant that we will all herd ourselves into our own virtual boxes, our phones and computers, and realize only once we're enslaved. He's right. Most of us in this room can't go an hour without checking messages and updates. Our every move is tracked and recorded. We're never offline, overwhelmed by our email, but also concerned if the load is light, rising and falling with the numbers of likes and comments that we get. In fact, research has shown how our brains release a hit of dopamine each time we post something personal and get attention from our social networks in return. Josh Harris made millions in the 90s, forecasting internet trends, and created the first internet television network long before there was broadband. He was determined to spend his money on a live social experiment which would prove our futures online. He foresaw that we would trade our privacy and eventually our freedom for the connection and recognition we so dearly crave. He created a miniature society inside 2 buildings in New York City, replete with 150 living pods and an 80-foot-long dining room table and a gun range. This is only 20 feet from the New York City courthouse at the time. Those were the days. This is pre-9/11. There were 110 surveillance cameras throughout the space, and every resident had their own channel through which to watch each other. Josh proudly told his inhabitants, "Everything is free except your image that we own." Still, hundreds of people lined up for a spot, and they filled out 500 private questions, donning uniforms and subjecting themselves to interrogations to be in that bunker, to be where it mattered at this Y2K moment. They lived in public for weeks until it was shut down by a SWAT team for being a millennial cult. But Josh had proved his point. With the internet, we will each want our 15 minutes of fame every day. Josh withstood ridicule, especially as he appeared in the bunker as his alter ego, Lovey the Clown, who symbolized his consumption of electronic calories, which he acquired from watching too much TV and media all his life. He actually was addicted to Gilligan's Island. That was like his idea of family. 10 years later, as Facebook soared in popularity and people were posting pictures of what they had for breakfast, it became apparent that the bunker was coming true in real life, and it was time for me to finish that movie. We've all watched each other with great interest, whether painting on cave walls or peeking over our neighbor's fence, which I just did this morning, by the way. No, I'm kidding. We're fascinated by each other. We want our lives to matter and are gravely uncomfortable with the notion that it might all be meaningless. So we seek to be remembered long before we're forgotten. We Live in Public is really a warning shot across the bow of our future. It's a horror film starring all of us. It's come true mostly now, and it's scarier as it's coming true than it was when it was mere prophecy. But there's an alternative to this kind of self-destructive creativity. And for the first time, almost all of us have access to it. We each have moments when we see something that could be done better or differently. And we'll either step out of line and pursue that, or more likely we'll consider the consequences and decide to stay the course. Meanwhile, we post a picture with a pretty preset filter and receive praise from the web. But that might be a distraction, a temporary feeling of importance that needs to be constantly maintained or only delays us from making our real contribution. For me, the camera's been a bridge into worlds I could never otherwise enter. From prisons to army barracks, from rock and roll escapades to climate, labs, and deep inside a cult, even. It gives me permission to come in and ask questions with a camera in my hand, and people answer them. Renoir says that we all make the same film again and again. When I first heard that, I thought, how boring. But now that I realize that we actually do, as directors, we track certain aspects of human behavior across our work. And for me, that means looking at what people will give up in order to have their lives matter, which is everything, basically. At the center of these worlds, though, there's always someone who can't help but do what they do. Their lives inherently matter because they envision something greater than themselves, which they are determined to make real. I call them impossible visionaries because every one of them at one point has said that what they wanted to do was impossible. And they frustrated so many people with their impossible behavior as they plowed forward anyhow. 10 years later, it's clear that the same technology that allows us to expose every corner of our lives and create self-serving avatars online has removed nearly every geographic, financial, and cultural boundary between us as individuals and the dream that we all share of making real, lasting impact. And we can do this faster and more efficiently than ever before. I thought if we could track this impossible gene across my subjects, maybe it'll help cultivate some of those trailblazing traits inside ourselves so we can seize upon this special moment in time. So all of my subjects can be loved or loathed depending on what part of the film you're watching. But you have to respect their courage and determination. They might be called a genius or mad or both. But ultimately, what they have in common is they're determined to follow their vision, no matter the consequences they might suffer. And suffer they do. Not one of my subjects has come out unscathed because they're doing something that's never been done before or breaking the rules of how it's done. No matter how many fans they have, they remain outsiders. Yet not one of them would go back and change their course. So Josh Harris was right when he pictured our future online, but he went from being revered as a businessman to losing everything, all his money, his girlfriend, and for a time, even his sanity. Yet Harris stands by his vision with no regrets, maintaining that it was all part of a journey and will inform what he's about to create next. Amanda Palmer is best known for her record-breaking Kickstarter, using the unprecedented computing power in her pocket to activate a vast social network and creating an alternative economy of art making with rewards like private house parties that go all night and painting sessions. Along the way, she's been constantly lambasted because she operates outside the system. She threatens the current power structure and those who benefit from it. I get a lot of hate, Amanda told me. Sometimes it gets to be too much and I collapse and I cry and shake my fist at God. But then I get up and I do something productive. Anton Newcomb, lead singer of the band The Brian Jonestown Massacre and the star of my film Dig, has defied the system from the songs he makes, how he makes them, and how he puts them out. First time I met him, he was facing an industry showcase and a potential record deal that he ultimately destroyed. He told me, I'm the letter writer and they're the postman. He prided himself on operating outside the business, making record after record for the price of a case of beer, long before there was a digital revolution that made that easy. Anton was not comfortable with being comfortable. He needed to ride that edge between genius and madness to make the vast and respected catalog of music he's known for today. Bjorn Lumbergh is an economist who realized that we aren't doing anything about climate change, partially because we're paralyzed by fear and also a feeling of futility, and also because of the political logjam that has left a single solution that is economically unfavorable, so no one will pass it. So for nearly 25, 30 years, we've left conferences around the world with no agreement, except for Paris, of course, which we have subsequently pulled out of. But here we all are, breathing the same air and facing a future for our children and our children's children that grows hotter by the minute. I filmed Lumbergh as he was called names, had a pie thrown in his face, and was kicked out of offices because he refuses to surrender to adversity, and he fights for what he believes in. And he goes from lab to lab and looks at the way that technology can be utilized and testing for more experimental and yet logical solutions. And while filming Cool It, we were so inspired by his cohorts. Other impossible visionaries like Stephen Salter, who invented wave energy and is developing a way to shoot salt at the clouds to brighten them and reduce temperatures. And Jonathan Trent, who's growing algae to trap the carbon underwater while creating food and fuel. For years, my team has amassed stories of the greatest thought leaders and doers from the perspective of their passionate beginnings on, so we can recognize ourselves in that narrative. We have hundreds of stories, and we aren't done yet. In fact, it's growing all the time. It's called A Total Disruption, and it's an ongoing empowerment network that documents some of the greatest tectonic shifts in the history of mankind. And we share our findings as we go in a multitude of forms. We call it a constantly releasing documentary that in and of itself is disruptively forging a new model, hopefully, for documentary filmmaking. Haven't we all driven by an abandoned building and imagined what it could be? Maybe we picture a dance studio or a school or a restaurant. Then the light changes and we drive on and we think to ourselves, how would I even do that? That's impossible. What is it that keeps us from stepping out of line to go after those fleeting thoughts we never pursue? We were all impossible as kindergartners, drawing on the walls or outside the lines, but at some point we finally understood, whether we were taught or ridiculed, that we need to draw inside the lines. And we were rewarded for it when we did. Oh, what a pretty picture we heard. How can we learn to entertain our impossible thoughts and give them a seat at the table? It's the people that step out of line and risk the doubt and ridicule that bring the greatest things into our lives. They see opportunity where others see impossibility. They trump the fear so many of us face when we face change. Change is scary, but all of these people do as Amanda Palmer advises. They embrace the flux. You've got to not know what's happening next. None of us know what's happening next, but we have to kind of just plow forward anyway. I stand here and urge you to get out there and pursue your vision, because we have an unprecedented opportunity right now with the greatest access to information and collaborators across time and space, and the lowest cost in history to start our own businesses, make and sell our art, or help a group of people we know needs our support. Graphic artist Shepard Ferry tells me selling directly to my fans means more money to help the cause itself. Now we have the platforms to do that, and it's about us sharing our ideas to access those platforms. He's built a thriving independent business through the internet that gives him freedom to support other artists and charities. Though he exhibits his work in prestigious galleries and museums, he still hits the streets to make public art, which has led to 16 arrests so far and counting. With A Total Disruption, we document chief executive artists, as I like to call them, like Shepard, and the other invisible superheroes who are using technology to invent our future. People like Bram Cohen, the founder of BitTorrent, or Tony Hsieh, the CEO of Zappos, has taken $350 million of his own money and his understanding of company culture to form a revitalization project for downtown Las Vegas. Or Dean Kamen, the inventor of the portable dialysis machine, a water purifying device also that needs no electricity, that's saving lives in Africa. They see a problem and they try to solve it. They have the courage to take that first step and the tenacity to follow through even after failure, which we all do. We all fail many times, and it's in that stumbling that we learn the most. We document them out of hope that we can all inspire each other to grow faster and smarter. To grow smarter, faster together, to nurture each other into creating more fulfilling, more independent lives, which will affect our world from the bottom up. I recently interviewed one San Quentin inmate who was part of a tech incubator called The Last Mile. He's never seen a computer in his life. I asked him to describe what he thinks the internet might look like. He told me, it's a place where you can feel yourself somewhere, where your dream or imagination can live and have the access and power to do anything with anybody in the world to make something of what's going on inside your mind. So think through the dreams you've had and stored away for another day, and get with a friend or go online. Somewhere, someone might have the same idea or be dreaming the same impossible vision, and now you can connect with them across those boundaries. Plus, you can test what you're creating immediately instead of using the same feedback loop to bask in your 15 minutes of fame. Speaking of fame, from 2013 to 2015, I documented Russell Brand as he realized that the fame he sought desperately and the money and drugs and sex that came along with it weren't going to make for a fulfilling life. His new mission became waking people up, helping us to realize that we're led from one moment to the next to pursue money, sex, drugs, and things outside of ourselves, like fame, which can then allow us to be exploited and controlled. When I heard him call himself crazy, I asked him to define insanity. He said it's like listening to the voice inside your head over the voices outside your head. Russell advised if you want to get anywhere in your life, the first thing you got to do is learn to disobey the people in your life that are telling you what to do right now. That's not true if you're on set, though, and it's your AD talking to you. So don't take that, like, don't follow Russell 100%. Take all of this with a grain of salt. You know when you've got, I'm back to quoting him, you know when you've got that feeling in your stomach, that this feeling that it's all bullshit? Well, that feeling is true. And the reason I'm so successful is because I tuned into that feeling. The film's called Brand: A Second Coming, and it's really about looking within for happiness and also about doing things of meaning with your life, acts of service and giving back, but all through the filter of this wild comedian's autodidact sort of brain and life journey. So speaking of wild comedians, my son, who has just turned 15, is the only person that I know that really gave Russell Brand a run for his money. And being a single mom and balancing my career alongside being a mother to a wild and wonderful young man has always been a delicate dance, and one that I've tried in my way, and I think for all of us women, we should try in our way, to really not let it stop us, but also see all of the opportunities where our careers can be additive to the lives of our children. And in my case, I took my son with me everywhere. He was born the week that I finished Dig, and it was no coincidence. I didn't want to bring that rock saga into motherhood. I came to Sundance and won Sundance that year, and then took him to, I think, 17 countries in the first 2 years of his life, and then raised him on a steady diet of documentaries, I think like maybe 300 or 400 over his life, which I consider to be sort of an empathy, a big empathy exercise or a dose of empathy. So that's how I've raised my child. But anyway, most recently, I have written and directed and produced a scripted film about yet another impossible visionary, photographer Robert Mapplethorpe. The film brings the famously groundbreaking erotic gay photographer alive via a nuanced and unflinching performance by actor Matt Smith, who, by the way, was cast because of my son, who is a huge Doctor Who fan, and convinced me to meet Matt Smith. And boy, was that a great idea. And that was 5 years ago, well before he played Prince Philip in The Crown. Nothing that he ever did on tape could have prepared me for what he did on screen in those 19 days we shot last summer in New York City. After 12 years of developing the film, we had 19 days to shoot, and his performance is outrageously good. So he brings Robert Mapplethorpe alive, and we get to witness him coming into his own as an artist, and in so doing, realizing who he is as a person. He takes on the art world and society at large in the 60s, 70s, and 80s before succumbing to AIDS and dying in 1989. He manages to make photography a collectible art form and to turn that which we deem obscene and pushed underground, gay, erotic, S&M life into fine art sculpture until it was celebrated. It's hard from a 2018 perspective to really realize just how underground gay life was back then. But he was determined to make it beautiful and to have people fall in love with the images, and in so doing, to fall in love with him. By the time of his death, you weren't famous if Robert didn't take your picture. But this was the same guy that was causing controversy and even lawsuits as museum directors were hauled away in handcuffs for showing his work. As it has been playing the festival circuit, it's clear that, like Dig, this is a film that is an anthem for artists. To stick to our guns, to step out of line, and to do the irrational if it feels right. And I might add that one of my great mentors at the Sundance Labs in 2010 is Leslie Linka Glatter, who I met there and went on to shadow on Homeland. And I'm so excited that she's going to be speaking with all of you today. But people like her and Bob Redford and Joan Darling and Joan Tewksbury, who wrote Nashville, and I don't even want to brush over Joan Darling, or Michael Hoffman, these mentors passing it on and passing it along have been essential to my growth as an artist. And just as Sam Wagstaff was essential to Robert Mapplethorpe in his progression to where he got to be, we all pull each other up, and it's so important, events like this, and for all of us to keep that in mind as we continue on our journeys as creatives. Anyway, Samuel Goldwyn is going to put this movie out. Mapplethorpe will come in theaters March 1st of next year, and hopefully it will inspire all of us, because it's those that push the envelope that make the change in this world. The impossible part of an impossible visionary means this person is sometimes difficult and unreasonable, but it also means that they're taking on the impossible, something that feels impossible to pull off. And they need to be a little bit impossible to hang in there. Despite the financial and emotional struggle, despite prevailing logic, reason, and the hemming and hawing of everyone around them. All of these impossible visionaries are driven to do what they do with confidence and tenacity that seems to be fed by an endless flow of serendipity. They have the feeling of being in sync with something greater than themselves. I've learned that serendipity breeds serendipity, that blessed good fortune or aha moment is obtainable, and it can be grown. And in order to experience increased serendipity, what we have to do is recognize and appreciate it. Disruptors, these crazy people that do make plans, they make plans, but they're willing to break their plans when they feel like something that is happening right now is more important, or if they need to change direction. We must trust our inner voice and listen to it. And when we do, it grows stronger. We've all experienced that, I know. But it's hard sometimes when you lose your way, but you have to trust your inner voice. We'll stumble, and then we'll be rewarded with more moments of serendipity, and our lives will blossom, and the beauty of our ideas will take physical shape. And as that happens, the world around us will blossom too. What we can do now as artists for ourselves and for the rest of our struggling society, which I know we all feel this. Despite the illusion of connection and choice, we are more isolated than ever before. And, our time on the internet, which feels like it's connecting us, is actually presenting us with a hologram of our needs. We have anxiety about impending climate disaster and so much more. This is evidenced by the opioid epidemic, which I'm currently documenting, and rising suicide rates among our youths. It's been predicted that 40% of us will be replaced by computers or robots. In the next 20 years, our jobs will be obsolete. Or those jobs will change so significantly that will require an entirely new set of skills. This is scary, all of it, but it's also exciting because it presents us with an opportunity as artists. Will technology destroy or save us? I don't know. I'm afraid it could go either way right now. It could go towards We Live in Public and the dark reality I filmed then, or the passion-driven democratization and actualization of a total disruption. We're either going to be trapped by our virtual boxes or freed by them, and right now it's a bit of both. But what I know is undeniable is that we have more power in our pockets than we've ever had. We have finally the chance to step out of line and be impossible together, and instead of pretending or presenting an idealized version of ourselves online, let's harness the power we have to connect and make our realities, to be who we are as individuals and create unique gifts for the world. Each one of us has an opportunity to do truly something massive and meaningful. Let's not pass it up. As one creator on our ATD platform put it best, if someone says your idea is crazy, then it's probably worth doing. Thank you.